Life of Life
with Julie Hilson.
Hello, dear friends, and welcome to another episode of Life of Love, where we gather every week to discuss with curiosity what's on our hearts and living our best lives, and without shame, without any kind of holding back of our genuine emotions, our connection with everything that is for our soul's good. And so we're holding space for this. And this week is a wonderful opportunity to pick the brain of a woman who she's dedicated to being ecstatic. We're talking about that. I'm like, I say it wrong every time because I say it wrong. Ecstatic. I love it. So I'm just welcoming in a dear soul, Alara. Alara Sage is an intuitive gifted mentor, a womb shaman, and a Shakti activator. She coaches provocatively and soulfully, which is so exciting. She helps people of all kinds, men and women, whatever you identify with, heal their sexual trauma, reclaim their creative force and energy, and create exactly what they desire. So what better way to live in magic than to be connected to that? So really, Alara, thank you for being here on Life of Love. I'm just delighted to host you today.
I'm so excited to be here, Julie, and to experience this ecstatic space with you.
Yes, well, oh my gosh, you're so awesome, because that was my first question. Like, what does that mean to you to live like that? And just give us some insight as to how you came about that, because it's just, I always think about divinity and living with you're cherished and you're divine and you're precious, but I love the charge of ecstatic.
Yeah, so ecstatic to me is really about being connected to our sexual power and our sexual energy. And it's living a life of pleasure. You know, one of the things I always say is all aspects of life are sexual. We don't think of that often in humanity, but everything is sexual in Mother Gaia and in the universe. And when we live ecstatically, we are connected in with our bodies, and we're connected in with the sense and the sensation of pleasure and aliveness that is available in every moment. And so we get to experience orgasm, full body orgasm, waves of bliss, you know, just in conversation, just in creating things that we enjoy, going on walks, like living that life in every moment, not just in the bedroom.
Taking in your environment, being open and available to the joy that charge that, yeah, I mean, a lot of times you look at certain things and you're like, yeah, that's sexual, but to have the viewpoint, the perspective of everything being sexual, that is definitely charged. I love it. And then you can play with that energy when you have that kind of playfulness that with your perspective. Oh, I love it. I love it. So it was hilarious because I was playing with that energy when I was like, I'm going to plug in my headphones because my headset wasn't working right. And I'm like, I'm just going all masculine. I'm just going to plug right in. And now I'm laughing at myself because I was picking up on that with you. I just love that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of the reasons why I say that everything is sexual, because in ourselves we have our inner feminine and we have our inner masculine. And our inner masculine is the penetrative force. We are penetrating our physical reality with our action, with our energy. Every single time we have an action, even non-action, because that's a choice of non-action, we are penetrating our physical reality in that action. And then the feminine is the receptive nature of our being, receiving the penetration from the universe back. So that's what I mean when I say that everything is sexual. We are constantly penetrating and receiving, penetrating and receiving. And when you understand that, you can really kind of diagnose like where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are, and where you're not really penetrating from the intention of your heart, that strong heart's desire with intentional penetration of the heart, and maybe you're not feeling safe to receive.
And it gives, it's just such insight and like a lens to be like, where am I? I can imagine that's a very awesome way to be conscious of your ecstaticness. Ecstaticness. Oh wow. So we wanted to dive in about the innocence and reclaiming that innocence, because that helps you come to every situation with serious mind and just levity. Like life gets heavy and we get these layers on. And so I think what we were going to try to illuminate is that shame makes us lose our innocence. So would you want to go into that a little bit and shine some light on what you've seen in your work and your shaman work and having clients and just, let's look at that. Look at our loss of innocence and how to reclaim it.
Yes. Again, it has a lot to do with our sexual energy. I mean, shame doesn't have to be sexual. But one of the ways that I really connected to this in myself was one day in meditation, my higher self was showing me how I was actually sexually lit at 4 years of age. And this is everybody. Now, that didn't mean I wanted to go have sex, right? That's not what I mean when I say sexually lit. Um, my sexual energy turned on at 4 years of age. And I'm not like, that's not like just me, like that happens for everybody. And in that space, we are, we don't understand what the act of sex is. We obviously don't have all of these programmings of what's appropriate or inappropriate, or, these religious structures and all of this nonsense, quite frankly, that is wrapped in and integrated into our relationship with our sexual energy. And in that meditation, my higher self just took me back to my 4-year-old self. And it was so beautiful because I was just out in nature. I spent a lot of time out in nature and I could feel everything. My body just felt everything. It felt the subtle breeze, and that felt so good. It just lit up my pleasure body. The sun shining on my face. I was walking barefoot, and feeling that earth beneath my feet. And I was in this state of ecstatic pleasure, just totally lit up. And of course, innocent with it all, just communing with the mother, communing with nature, communing with this just beautiful essence of myself, my body, my humanness, and Mother Gaia. And, then after that, I was right around that time, actually, I was sexually abused and sexually abused several times throughout my life. And as well as, my parents felt that energy. And it was like, whoa, that's
Mm-hmm.
not safe. Stop. Right. Like we hear about as like, I'm a mother, we hear about boys like playing with themselves and like, whoa, that's not okay. That's not appropriate. And our society immediately starts to shame this
Mm-hmm.
very innocent expression. And so right away I started to think, wow, like these sensations in my body, they're not okay. Like there's something really wrong with them because like I'm getting shut down, right? They're not safe. And I started to shut them down. And then, it just progressed throughout my life. And in that meditation, really reclaiming that within myself and granting myself just my erotic innocence, and that, literally giving myself permission to, again, feel that in every single moment and every single circumstance, to be lit, to be aroused, and redefining that is truly innocent.
Mm. There's so much there. And I can totally relate to this because I remember being a little girl and you could feel like the pulse of the earth coming up through your body. Like just being in nature, my memory, if I were going to go back to my inner child, 4-year-old, was like, I was in a bed of clover at my uncle's dairy farm. I was there for the weekend. And I was just laying in a bed of clover watching the bees go in and out. not a care in the world. I could have been there for 6 hours. I don't know how long I was there, but it was just pure bliss, and I could feel the heartbeat. And I know what you're talking about. It's like this energy, this whatever society has labeled it. They're just trying to protect us. When they say, "Oh, you can't express like that," like the shame around it. And it's misdirected and used to control. And so, that's is something to explore in your childhood when you touched yourself in front of your parents or in the bathtub and they're like, "Whoa, don't do that. That's wrong," right? Like that strong reaction kids pick up on, and then they're like, "Well, that's not okay," because it's just like you touched a hot stove, right? But it was your body. And
Yeah.
that's lack of embodiment when you're not allowed to associate with your body or have the reassurance that it might be a private time thing, but it's not bad,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not shameful. So that's how the shame layers get built up, is just an innocent exploration, and then it's charged with something that is deemed as wrong. As yeah, it's because I can totally see where guardians or parents could be like, "Oh no, you don't want to show up in life like that." Like you could see it from both ways. And I don't know if you have kids, but um yeah, you worry about kids getting putting out that energy, and then they might be targeted, or it's a touchy subject, and it's such a powerful thing to access when you can look at it through adult. And we've talked about this topic, um, when you have beliefs that you just accept things as a child as truth, and then you have to go back and say, does that fit me? Is that okay for me? And this is another really powerful thing to look at, right? Like, and you talk about how it's your source of wealth,
Mm-hmm.
is your sexual energy. So, man, I'm sure there's a lot to do to heal that. And what would you like to share? What's on your heart to share about reclaiming that sexual energy and getting beyond the shame? Is it that you reframe it according to what serves you and what your ideal is, or is it a step by step, or how does that work when you're helping someone reclaim their innocence with that?
Yeah, it's not mental. It's in the
Mm,
body.
it's in the body.
And, our body has all the information and all the wisdom and, all of our trauma and our ancestral energy, our past life energy is held in the body. And so it's about first starting to, of course, be willing, right? To be willing to explore that in yourself and to start to breathe into your body, holding your awareness at your sexual organs. And, I do a lot of work with both women and men in what I call de-armoring and de-armoring, because it's amazing when you really start to do this work, you see how much you hold in your sexual organs and how much protection you're holding there. And that kind of protection is there, it's walls, right? It's building these layers upon us, and we do that in our sexual energy. We also do that in our heart, protect your
Mm.
heart. And it doesn't work, for one, and two, it totally shuts you down. It's like building a fortress around you, and wonderful, now you're in a fortress, but you're all alone, and you can't experience anything because now you're stuck in the fortress that you built around yourself. And that is what these walls do. They don't protect us, they detach us, disconnect us ultimately from ourself and from our innocence and from our divinity and our pleasure and our bliss and the sensations of, all the different experiences that we can have as humanity. So I teach people to breathe into their bodies, to bring their awareness there, and, learn to work with your body. Because again, your body will tell you everything. I'm a big empowerment person, like, I don't want any of my clients to just be like, oh, I need to keep having sessions with you. Like, no, I'm going to teach you how to do it yourself. Because ultimately, like, that's what we want, right? We want humans that know how to be embodied and connected and in communion with the self. So learning how to breathe into your body and be aware of those walls, be aware of the triggers, like, for instance, if people are listening to this and they're feeling uncomfortable, if they're feeling awkward, if they're kind of like, even the comment, like, that's a touchy subject. Is it? No, it's just because we're defining it as touchy. I don't believe that we need to not talk about this stuff. I don't believe that we need to protect our children. I believe that we need to empower our children, which is two different things, right?
Gotcha.
So noticing, are you triggered when you, like, for me, when I was really going through this process of myself, like, Tantra was like a push pull for me. Like, I had this pull towards it, and simultaneously I was just kind of like, I don't know. It's like, I just want to push that away, like, I don't want to have anything to do with it. And it was a trigger for me, and conversations about sexual liberation and exploration were a trigger for me. So those are always showing us, where are you holding the shame?
Yeah, and you can. It's really interesting because like you said, the level of discomfort tells you where you need to push into.
Yes.
And you're like, damn it, really? Not again. Why can't just something be easy? No, you've got to push through it to get beyond it. So many things. And so, yeah, that resonates with me so much. And so feeling it to your body and being present with that is liberating. Yeah. And you can access this part of your soul that might have been buried or insulated for fear of not knowing how to use it, or just the social programming. I love that. So, man, I'm just processing so much because
Yeah.
I was abused sexually as a child, and it's hard because I had to reclaim that, because you put it as something that's outside of you, and then you're protecting yourself because it's a protective mechanism to be like, well, that's over here and my body's over here. And when you insulate or try to protect yourself against something that, maybe you have no idea what was going through that person's mind. And it happens. There's so many people that it's happened to that, there's different philosophies, and I dealt with it with my being present and owning my sexuality. And I almost came to the point where I was like, I'm sort of glad that happened because it really made me look at it, and I don't take it for granted. Like, when I took ownership of it, I was like, wow, this is really good, powerful, wonderful things. And I might not have really seen it as that precious if it hadn't happened. I don't know. I know that I don't take anything back. Everything makes me stronger. And I hope that anyone that's listening who might be dealing with any kind of, sexual abuse, if you're really having trouble, get a counselor. You got to talk about it. You got to get through it. And then have someone like Alara help you reconnect to your innocence and your divinity, because you didn't choose to get that taken away, but you can choose how you're going to use it to move beyond it. So it's not, life gives you things, and you can rise above and figure out how you're going to weave it into your story and make yourself stronger, or you can become a victim to it. It's like anything, someone pushes you down at the bus stop, or, someone cuts you off. You can choose to be a victim and be upset, or you can just be like, well, that person just made a bad choice, and that doesn't make me a person that's a victim, so.
Yeah. And, like, again, this is something that I feel like humanity loves to pussyfoot around. And, the truth is that when we really face our trauma and acknowledge that that doesn't define us, because sexual trauma is intense, it is the most vulnerable state of you. It hits you in that most vulnerable act, your most vulnerable part of your body. It hits you at your vulnerability. And so that's why we tend to like I shut mine out of my awareness to the point that I didn't even remember it, right? Because it was so traumatic to the little version of me. But this is why we tend to pussyfoot around it, is because, yeah, it hits us in our vulnerability. And simultaneously, when we learn to acknowledge that that doesn't define me, and I'm not wrong or unworthy or shameful for the fact that it happened to me, and I can process it through my body and release it and let it go, what we learn is how powerful we truly are. Because nothing, even the thing that hits us in our most vulnerable, innocent space, gets to define us, right? Gets to have power over us, gets to shut us down from our ecstatic bliss. That's where I say no. Like, let's have these conversations. Let's show up for the little version of us that got sexually molested, or even like the teenage or the early 20 version of us that was raped, and show up and claim this trauma in our body, move it through so that we can hold that power that we are in our bodies.
Amen. That's where it is. That's where it is. Just speak it like it is. Make it real.
Yeah. Yes.
And hold space. Hold space for, that was a shitty thing. But it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't define you.
Yeah. And then that little child within us feels safe again to come out, because we're saying, I'm here. I'm showing up for you. Like, I got your back. Because in that time, most of this happened when we're children. Even those who it happened later in life, they've usually had something earlier on that they don't remember. And so, when we were children, we didn't get to have our own backs. And when we go through that process of healing that in our body, that's where we're showing up for that little child and saying, I got you, you're safe. Like, I will not allow this to happen to you again. And that's where that innocence now, in that essence of safety, of support, of love, of not turning our backs and saying, I don't want to look at this because it's so painful, right? I don't want to look at this trauma because it defines me or it's difficult to talk about. Like, we turn towards and we say, no, I'm here for you, inner child. I will not desert you. I will not abandon you. I will not turn my back on you. Because so many of us didn't have any kind of support like that. We weren't spoken to. We weren't allowed to express. That's when the inner child feels safe, and that innocence, that playfulness comes back out in ourselves. Like, the amount of playfulness I have reclaimed. I was anal AF because I was so shut down. I didn't want to be anal. It was just who I was, because I didn't know how to be my like silly, quirky self. I remember one time I had this astrology reading, and the astrologer was like, you're so quirky. And I was just like, what are you talking about? No, I'm not. And now I'm just like, I'm so quirky and silly and goofy and dorky and all the things, because my child is like, yes, let's play. Let's have fun. Like, screw this adulting.
Yeah, right. I hear you so strong, Alara, because I've been having conversations with my inner child a lot lately, and I'm like, Julie, this is bullshit. We're just gonna dance, and we're gonna, like, this adult stuff. And I used to be hyper vigilant so I could control the room, control everyone around me. I don't know how my husband put up with me, honestly. No, because this came out after, I was like in my 30s before I started looking at this stuff and questioning
Yeah.
like why I was doing things, because I didn't want to be like that mom that was just uptight about everything. And I didn't want to have deep wrinkles in my face from being critical. You know what I mean? Like, I'm like, I am not going to do this. Like, and my soul, I don't know what happened, but yeah. So I have conversations with my inner child all the time. I'm like, Julie, you know, this is what we're going to do. And this is why. And it's so much more fun. And it just makes everything lighter.
Yeah.
You don't have to be responsible for everything.
Yes. 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 And imagine if like everybody was just in their inner child, right? Like how playful humanity would be, And yes, we need to do and we need to create because that's the feminine and the masculine. And ultimately it's a trinity. And we don't need all three. And like that inner child is just really missing in the majority of us. And that innocence that really comes through the reclamation and the transcendence of that shame. And, we're talking about sexual energy, but shame doesn't have to be sexual. It can happen in a variety of different ways. But I will say that shame is held in the sexual energy and in the pelvis, even if you weren't shamed for that. So it's very intriguing because it really comes into our creative power and our ability to create our life. That's where we feel like we're not worthy, like what we create is just inadequate and kind of falls short. And as you brought up earlier, it comes into our relationship with money, with wealth, and also our relationship with power.
Yeah, nothing's an island. Like everything affects everything else. So it's worth looking at, people. It's uncomfortable, but it's worth looking at. And it's just more fun when you can get there. And I notice when I'm feeling heavy and I'm having those days, they don't last as long because I can reconnect. Which, like some days are just not great days. And that's the ebb and flow. That's the perpetual constriction expansion. That's Mother Earth. That's our universe. Well, our universe is constantly expanding. I mean, I was just learning about this. Our universe is bigger every day until it's just gone. And then it'll start all over with a new Big Bang. I was just listening to this Conversations with God audiobook, and I was just like, I'm in the second book, and I'm like, whoa, that's why time is so relative to the size of the universe. And we can get really deep in that, but
yeah, but it's still expanding and contracting because then it expands until it totally contracts back into the void, and then it comes back out again. So its expansion, contraction is just on a much larger scale than like, the ebb and flow of the tides and our breath and all of those like micro versions of that ebb and flow, expansion, contraction.
Well, I love this because the next thing I want to talk about is creativity. And why should we care about being creative was I was going to ask you. And you just sort of touched on it with when you're contracting in your labor, and you're giving birth, these contractions, they hurt and they're, it's intense, but then, this creation of love comes through of your joining. And so, yeah, what's your take on, why is it worth it to go there and be creative?
We are creative, full stop. We are creators. We're creating every single moment. We're creating with every single action, every single thought, every single decision. So it's less a question of why is it worth it to go into your creative self versus do you desire to consciously create your reality or
Yes.
just splatter the paint all over the canvas of your life and kind of just see how it goes.
Yeah, I love how you just put that. That's not an option. So it's worth it. People are like, oh, I'm not artsy, I'm not creative. yes, you are.
Yes.
It's just what you're choosing.
Yeah. And I used to think that too, which is ironic because when I was a child, I was very creative. I would write short stories that just streamed out of nowhere. And I did a lot of coloring and art and things like that. And then I shut it all down with my sexual energy because guess what? Your sexual energy is your creative energy. And so is your Kundalini Shakti. And for the longest time, I just thought I'm just not creative. And, through this process of opening myself back up, I've gone into those creative ventures again of writing and painting. And that's not for everybody, other people's versions of creating. Some people, create Excel spreadsheets and, they're formulating how numbers work together, right? That's creation. Other people create gardens, right? Like creation is everything. So I think when we think of creative, we think just of artsy. But if you really just open up and ask yourself, what do I create? What's fun for me to create? Maybe you create experiences. Maybe you really love hosting dinners, right? And you create that experience for other people to come into. So it's more like expanding on our very limited perspective of what creativity is and really finding our unique genius within the creative energy that we already are.
Love it. I love it. It's so perfect. And if you're feeling lack of juice behind what you're doing, then there's a big sign, right? Like take some time to just be with yourself. Have some time to, people, the easy default is meditate, but maybe it's just spending time outside and feeling the breeze, just connecting with your body in whatever way. Maybe it's a bath or a shower where you're just shutting off everything, because in order to create, you got to turn off the noise that's constantly coming at you, the static. So that's it's a huge flag if you're like, well, I can't even think of an original thing. Well, self-care, get there, get to some place where you can clear it out, do a mental dump. Like it's very essential. And all these solar flares and the energetics that are coming in, we're recording and this is going to be published about a month later, but I'm sure there's going to be some internet outages and everything's just a little bit chaotic right now, but we're getting through and it's upgrading us. It's making things happen so much faster. And it's a gift to integrate these energies. And so, ride the wave. Come on. It's going to be really great. Don't fight it, So I also wanted to let everyone know that Elena has her own podcast, the Ecstatic Woman podcast. And so if you want to tune into more of this message, she's there. She's on all the major platforms, and check her podcast out. And then we're coming up to our time. So is there anything else, Alara, that you'd like to share with the audience?
No, I mean, ultimately, I just want to really thank the audience for listening and, even just having the courage to listen to these kinds of conversations. It takes courage. And I really honor those who are listening to this, who really showed up and could receive this conversation because, I do teach provocatively. I bring it in and I talk straight to the wounds. And so thank you for receiving that into your being.
Thank you. It was a blessing. And, I always tell people if it doesn't serve you, then leave it and take what serves and leave what doesn't. So it's all good. And I respect wherever you are on the path. But yes, thank you for listening. And Alara, your contribution is amazing. And you're healing these mother wounds so that we can show up as the God and goddesses that we are. And, it's our birthright and we're beings of light. So I'm just really excited to help anyone shine and we'll just get the polish out and clean out those cobwebs and we can all just walk around like we're on meds. Like people are like, well, what are you on? I'm like, I'm on life. So it makes some people angry, but I get it. It's all good. Well, Laura, thanks again. I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much for having me again, Julie. And thank you again to your audience. It was a lot of
Anytime.
fun.
Yeah.